Live sound recordings were by Chris Watson and the producer was Sarah Blunt. And we'll be hearing from Hugh Dennis again at this time tomorrow. He'll be making a special guest appearance in Reincarnathan, a comedy about the afterlife starring Daniel Rigby and Diane Morgan.
This is
BBC Radio 4
Extra.
Jane Austen wrote Lady Susan in 1794 in the form of a series of letters, but it wasn't published until 1871, more than 50 years after the author's death. Now on Radio 4 Extra, we begin a new 10-part adaptation we'll be hearing throughout this week and next, featuring Harriet Walter in the title role, alongside a cast which includes Maggie Steed as Mrs. Johnson and Imelda Staunton as Mrs. Vernon. Recently widowed and in a financially precarious state, the unscrupulous and beautiful Lady Susan Vernon is determined to scheme her way through high society in search of a profitable new match to maintain her opulent lifestyle. Dramatised by Lavinia Murray, this is Jane Austen's Lady Susan.
Mr. Johnson, husband, sir. You may think that our memories are identical, or at least consistent, given the time we have been married. However, that would be an error of presumption. You have tried to make me respectable by diminishing my interests and depriving me of friends. But I have expanded your limitations by subterfuge, out of necessity. This gruel is as delicious as the existence you intended for me. 10 years have passed since I first thought that the gout and your age would return me to a single life. I didn't expect to be your wife all this time. It is also 10 years since the biggest society scandal. This is where our memories diverge. You knew little of what actually went on. I knew it all. My dear friend, Lady Susan Vernon, 4 months a widow, left Langford, the home of your former ward, Mrs. Mannering, having secured both the affection of Mrs. Mannering's husband and of her sister's lover, Sir James Martin. Lady Susan then removed herself from an unpleasant situation and, with perfect propriety, went to stay at the home of her dead husband's relations. I'm sure you remember her voice. Everyone does.
Langford, December. My dear brother, I can no longer refuse myself the pleasure of spending some weeks with you at Churchill, and therefore, if quite convenient to you and Mrs. Vernon, I shall hope to be introduced to a sister whom I have so long desired to be acquainted with. My kind friends here most affectionately urge me to prolong my stay, but their cheerful dispositions lead them too much into society for my present state of mind, and I look forward to when I shall be admitted into your delightful retirement. I long to be made known to your dear little children, in whose hearts I shall be very eager to secure an interest. I shall soon have occasion for all my fortitude, as I am on the point of separation from my own daughter. The long illness of her dear father prevented my paying her that attention which duty and affection dictated, and I have reason to fear that her governess was unequal to the charge. I have therefore resolved on placing her at one of the best private schools in town, where I shall have an opportunity of leaving her myself in my way to you. I am determined not to be denied admittance at Churchill. It would give me most painful sensations to know that it were not in your power to receive me. Your most obliged and affectionate sister, Susan Vernon.
And then she wrote me her honest intentions.
Langford. You are mistaken, my dear Alicia, in supposing me fixed at this place for the rest of the winter. It grieves me to say how greatly you were mistaken. At present, nothing goes smoothly. The females of the family are united against me. You foretold how it would be. and Mannering is so uncommonly pleasing that I was not without apprehensions. I remember saying to myself, I like this man, pray heaven no harm come of it. But I was determined to be discreet, to bear in mind my being only 4 months a widow, and to be as quiet as possible. I've admitted no one's attentions but Mannering's. I've avoided all flirtation, except towards Sir James Martin, on whom I bestowed a little notice in order to detach him from Miss Mannering. But if the world could know my motive, they would honour me. It was the sacred impulse of maternal affection, the advantage of my daughter, that led me on. And if that daughter were not the greatest simpleton on earth, I might have been rewarded for my exertions, as Sir James did make proposals to me for Frederica. But Frederica, who was born to be the torment of my life, chose to set herself so violently against the match that I thought it better to lay aside the scheme for the present. I've repented that I did not marry him myself, and were he less contemptibly weak, I certainly should. But I own myself rather romantic, and riches only will not satisfy me. The event of all this is very provoking. Sir James is gone, Maria Mannering highly incensed, and Mrs. Mannering so enraged against me that I should not be surprised at her appealing to her guardian if she had the liberty of addressing him. But there your husband stands my friend, and the kindest, most amiable action of his life was his throwing her off forever on her marriage. Keep up his resentment, I charge you. We are now in a sad state. No house was ever more altered. The whole family are at war, and Mannering scarcely dares speak to me. It is time for me to be gone. I have determined on leaving them, and shall spend a comfortable day with you in town within this week. If I'm as little in favour with Mr. Johnson as ever, you must come to me, but I hope this may not be the case. For as Mr. Johnson, with all his faults, is a man to whom that great word respectable is always given, his slighting has an awkward look. I take town in my way, for I'm really going to Churchill. Forgive me, my dear friend, it is my last resource. Were there another place in England open to me, I would prefer it. Charles Vernon is my aversion, and I am afraid of his wife. However, I must remain till I have something better in view. My young lady accompanies me to town, where I shall deposit her under the care of Mrs. Summers till she becomes a little more reasonable. The price is immense, and much beyond what I can ever attempt to pay. Adieu. I will send you a line as soon as I arrive in town. Yours ever, Susan Vernon.
Then Catherine Vernon, the sister-in-law whose marriage Lady Susan had tried with great imagination and persistence to prevent, wrote to Lady de Courcy, her mother.
Churchill. My dear mother, I am very sorry to tell you that we will not be spending Christmas with you. Lady Susan has declared her intention of visiting us, and as such a visit is in all probability merely an affair of convenience, it is impossible to conjecture its length. Langford appeared so exactly the place for her in every respect, as well from the elegant and expensive style of living there as from her attachment to Mrs. Mannering, that I was very far from expecting so speedy a distinction, though I always imagined that we should be obliged to receive her. Mr. Vernon was a great deal too kind to her when he was in Staffordshire. Her behaviour has been so inexcusably artful and ungenerous since our marriage was first in agitation, that no one less amiable and mild could have overlooked it. And though, as his brother's widow, it was proper to render her pecuniary assistance, I cannot help thinking his pressing invitation to visit us at Churchill unnecessary. Disposed, however, as he always is to think the best of everyone, her display of grief and regret and general resolutions of prudence were sufficient to soften his heart. But I am still unconvinced. She will have occasion for all those attractive powers for which she is celebrated to gain any share of my regard, and I shall guard myself against their influence. She makes very generous mention of my children, but I am not weak enough to suppose a woman who has behaved with inattention, if not unkindness, to her own child, should be attached to any of mine. Miss Vernon is to be placed at a school in town before her mother comes to us, which I am glad of. It must be to her advantage to be separated from her mother, and a girl of 16 who has received so wretched an education would not be a very desirable companion here. Reginald has long wished to see this captivating Lady Susan, and we shall depend on his joining our party soon. I am glad to hear that my father continues so well, and am, with best love, etc., Catherine.
Mrs. Vernon's brother, Reginald de Courcy, then heir to the de Courcy fortune, heard that Lady Susan had invited herself to Churchill. Intrigued by his own conjecture and by Lady Susan's reputation, he, too, descended on Churchill.
Parklands. My dear sister, I congratulate you and Mr. Vernon on being about to receive into your family the most accomplished coquette in England. It has lately fallen in my way to hear some particulars of her conduct at Langford, which prove that she does not confine herself to that sort of honest flirtation which satisfies most people, but aspires to the more delicious gratification of making a whole family miserable. By her behaviour to Mr. Mannering, she gave jealousy and wretchedness to his wife, and by her attentions to a young man previously attached to Mr. Mannering's sister, deprived an amiable girl of her lover. I learnt all this from a Mr. Smith, who has just come from Langford, where he was a fortnight in the house with her ladyship. What a woman she must be! I long to see her, and shall certainly accept your kind invitation, that I may form some idea of those bewitching powers which can do so much, engaging at the same time and in the same house the affections of two men who were not at liberty to bestow them, and all this without the charm of youth. I'm glad that Miss Vernon does not come with her mother. She has not even manners to recommend her, according to Mr. Smith's account. I shall be with you very soon. Your affectionate brother, Reginald de Courcy.
Reginald de Courcy is already half in love with her, wouldn't you say?
Churchill. I received your note, my dear Alicia, just before I left town, and rejoiced to be assured that Mr. Johnson suspected nothing of your engagement the evening before. Since he will be stubborn, he must be tricked. I have no reason to complain of my reception from Mr. Vernon, but I confess myself not equally satisfied with the conduct of his lady. I wanted her to be delighted at seeing me. I was as amiable as possible, but all in vain. To be sure, when we consider that I did take some pains to prevent my brother-in-law marrying her, this want of cordiality is not very surprising. And yet it shows a vindictive spirit to resent a project which never succeeded. I sometimes repent that I did not let Charles buy Vernon Castle when we were obliged to sell it, but it was a trying circumstance, as the sale took place exactly at the time of his marriage, and my husband's dignity would have been lessened by his younger brother's possession of the family estate. Could we have lived with Charles and kept him single, I should have been very far from persuading my husband to dispose of it elsewhere. And the event has justified me. Here are children in abundance. As to money matters, it has not withheld him from being very useful to me. I really have a regard for him. He is so easily imposed on. I mean to win my sister-in-law's heart through her children. I know all their names already, and I'm going to attach myself to one in particular, a young Frederick, whom I take on my lap and sigh over for his dear uncle's sake. Poor Mannering. I need not tell you how much I miss him. I found a dismal letter from him on my arrival here, full of complaints of his wife and sister, and lamentations on the cruelty of his fate. I passed off the letter as his wife's to the Vernons, and when I write to him, it must be under cover to you. Yours ever, S.V.
There, sir, how little you knew. The manipulations of a clever woman are more afflicting than anything fate can deliver.
The story continues at this time tomorrow, when, after being installed in her brother's home, Lady Susan receives a mixed reception.
Don't you go getting yourself into trouble.
What's where you're going, you little weasel?
Sorry, Mr. Badger, sir. Trouble is easy when it's expected of you.
The Wind in the Willows, reimagined from the